The night had a way of swallowing sound along this stretch of Texas, like the highway itself had learned to hold its breath. Heat bled off the asphalt in slow waves even after the sun was gone, and the air carried that faint after-rain smell of wet creosote and dust. When the Navarro family turned off the highway and rolled beneath the blinking star of the Mesquite Star Lodge, the neon made their windshield glow the color of an old bruise. Luis Navarro, 43, dentist turned delivery driver after this. Clinic downsized, gripped the wheel like it might buck. His wife, Marisol, rubbed her temples in small circles, the way she did when highway miles stacked themselves behind her eyes. Their son, Gabe, 14 and perpetually 2 steps away from an argument, had headphones half on, half off. Their daughter, Isa, 7, slept with a crayon clutched in her fist like a talisman. They'd meant to push on to San Antonio for the weekend with cousins, but a detour around an overturned cattle truck had chewed up daylight. And by the time the sky went black, the kids were cranky and the adults were silent. The Mesquite Star looked like a last resort that knew it. Stucco walls, the color of old mustard, sagged around doors that had been painted and repainted until the numbers looked like tattoos on scar tissue. A busted Coke machine leaned against the office window, permanently promising ice cold and faded. Letters. 2 letters worked reliably on the sign. M and O, the rest flickered when the wind bothered them. A moth bumped itself stupid against the O and fell like a tiny trunk to the concrete. Luis parked beneath a light that hummed like a refrigerator and threw daggers of moth shadow across the hood. One night, he said, not turning around, "We'll be gone at sunrise." Marisol reached back and untangled Isa's seatbelt. The girl blinked herself awake and asked if this was the place with the pool. "No, baby," Marisol said, "the place with the pool was 30 miles behind them, and they'd voted no because the room smelled like pine cleaner and old smoke." The office door stuck for a second before it gave, leading a tired metal sound. Inside, the air tasted like the memory of cigarettes and lemon oil. A bell sat dead center on the counter. When Luis pressed it, it made the saddest ding he'd ever heard. The man who emerged from the back looked dissembled from the motel, itself thin, linoleum pale, hair the color of mop water, eyes that had learned not to bother. His name tag read Rich in black Sharpie. He didn't smile. He slid the ledger forward. Name? Navarro. Luis. Family of 4. Rich licked his thumb and flipped a page, the way people used to do before the world learned what paper could. Carry. He took cash. He didn't offer a receipt. He handed over a key on a plastic diamond fob, the same yellow as the walls, with 214 pressed into it. 1. His voice sounded like cigarettes through gravel. 1 key. Don't lose it. We don't cut after 10. We won't, Luis said, because that's what you say, even when you've already lost the thing 2 seconds after you promised you wouldn't. They climbed the exterior stairs, the metal groaning with memory under their feet. The corridor smelled like wet carpet and soil after a potted plant had given up. At 214, Luis worked the key twice. The lock stuck, then surrendered. Inside, the cold blew out of the window unit like a relief you don't trust. The beds were made military tight. The bedspreads were a landscape of paisley that had seen more human stories than any book on the knitstand. The bathroom fan wheezed. When Marisol flipped it, Isa went straight to the window and parted the noise-stained curtains with 2 fingers. "It's pretty," she lied. Gabe dropped his backpack beside the nearest bed and started scrolling with a single-mindedness. Of the almost grown. Wi-Fi? Probably, Marisol said. Probably not, Luis said, then kissed her temple, because you don't argue about little things when the big things are unpaid and waiting. It was Marisol who noticed the second key first. It sat on the round table by the window, on top of A folded paper placemat with the Motel logo, a star trying to be proud, printed in the corner. Another plastic diamond, the same shade of tired yellow, the same 214 stamped deep into it. "He gave you two?" she asked. Luis shook his head and held up the single fob Rich had handed him. "Just one." They looked at each other for a beat, both trying to decide if it mattered. Maybe housekeeping had left a spare. Maybe Rich had forgotten. Maybe a previous guest. The explanations came quick and cheap, the way explanations do when you're exhausted and you want them to be true. Luis pocketed both out of habit, the way a father pockets dead batteries and loose screws and receipts for things he's already returned. They hunted the room for other oddities and found none. Nothing seemed broken or staged, and that felt, somehow, stranger. They ate what was left of the gas station food, dried their hands on towels that smelled like a clean shirt at the back of the closet, and fell into a sleep made of miles. Sometime after 2, wind pushed through the corridor and made the door in its frame. Sometime after 3, Isa sat bolt upright and whispered, "Somebody's at the door," and Marisol, half asleep, said, "No, Mia, go back to bed," and pulled her down and smoothed her hair until the girl curled again. Like a comma, close to 3:15 Ray Collins would write that time later and draw a box around it. Someone used the payphone outside the office. The motel had never bothered to remove it. The handset cord was coiled and sticky with 1,000 stories. Whoever lifted it dropped a quarter that hit metal with a sound that traveled up the corridor, bright as a coin in a church plate. No one opened their door to look. This was the kind of place where you didn't. Morning was the color of dishwater, the same hum of the same lights. A housekeeper knocked once, twice, and when nobody answered, she let herself in with a key from the ring she wore like jewelry. The beds were made as if no one had slept at all. The towels hung in their original swans. Toothbrushes still dry-mouthed in a zip bag. Suitcases lined up like obedient children. On the table by the window sat 2 key fobs. On the bathroom counter, a travel bottle of children's shampoo, still sealed. The minivan below wore a crisp layer of dew. The windshield wipers hadn't cut it. The housekeeper stood very still for a long breath, then called the manager, who called Rich, who hesitated an hour, because who wants to involve police when a room looks clean and the ledger says cash and everything at a place like this survives? By avoiding attention, and then finally dialed a number he knew by heart and hoped he'd never use. Detective Ray Collins arrived with a notebook older than the rookies and a coffee she'd drink cold without complaint. She had the practical haircut of somebody who'd grown tired of hair in her face during searches and interviews. She moved, like a person who used her attention like a knife. The first thing she noticed was the temperature, and the way the number on the unit didn't match the sensation on her skin. The room felt colder than it had any right to like someone had. Opened a freezer and left it yawning. The second thing she noticed was the arrangement. Everything politely present. People who leave mess behind. People who vanish leave order. Ray made a quiet line of the details in her mind. 2 keys on the table. A 3rd key in the pocket of a father whose pants weren't here. A motel with a payphone that still had. A dial tone. A corridor camera that had been broken for years, according to Rich. Outside, a minivan that hadn't moved. She tugged on gloves and went looking for the human smudge the room should have contained. She found it only in the trash, a torn page from a small spiral notebook. At the top, in neat block letters, someone had written payphone 3:12 a.m., then a local number with a Hill Country Exchange. Ray boxed that time in her head again. She lifted the shade with 2 fingers and watched her own reflection hover over the parking lot. The payphone sat crooked on its pole, as if somebody in a hurry had leaned on it wrong. She walked out to it The handset felt colder than the morning. She pressed it to her ear. A dial tone had the weirdly alive sound of a thing that shouldn't still exist. She fed it a quarter. The coin fell bright, familiar. She didn't call the number on the page. Not yet. Inside the office, Rich's ledger looked like evidence from a museum. Ray turned pages like relics. October's squares were almost empty. The Navarros were the last entry the night before. A tight handwriting that reminded her of men who pay cash and keep change and apologize for nothing. She looked up. How many keys to 214 do you have? Rich didn't like the question. One? On the board, he said, as if reciting policy made it true. The other stays with me. You gave them one. Gave him one. Rich's eyes flicked to the door like a guilty dog waiting for thunder. You ever make extras? Lose one? Replace a lock without swapping out the number on the fob? No. Anyone else on last night? Just me. You see them leave? Nobody leaves before I do unless I see. Then I didn't. His face had the durability of people who learn to outlast trouble by outwaiting. Ray let the quiet do its work. Sometimes silence solved whole cases. Rich swallowed. People don't like the cameras, he said. They complain. So I don't turn them on at night. The corridor camera above his head stared at her blank as a dead eye. Ray stepped back into 214 and sat on the edge of the nearest bed. The mattress didn't give. It stood at attention. She looked at the boy's backpack, zipped and staged. She imagined the boy Gabe packing it with the practiced sulk of 14, putting in the things he cared about and leaving the things he didn't. The zipper rested like a mouth that had last spoken compliance. She touched nothing. She crouched instead and lowered herself to eye level with the table. 2 keys. She lifted them by their fobs, checked the wear around the key teeth. One showed the polished shine of use. The other was matte, like a spare that hadn't seen daylight since the lock had been changed. She held them both up to the light and saw a thin smudge of oil on the unused one, the kind of oil you find on a janitor's ring-fresh, mechanical, not skin. Housekeeping, she called without looking up, and the woman who had found the room hovered in the doorway, wringing the cloth in her hands like she might squeeze memory out of it. Do you carry spares? Ever leave them in a room? The woman shook her head hard. Only my ring. We don't leave keys. Did you clean this room yesterday? Before they checked in. Yes. Anything off? The woman hesitated for a heartbeat, then said, The phone blinked. The motel phone? The one on the nightstand, she said, pointing at the beige relic that looked like a museum piece. The red light. Message. But there was no message when I picked it up. Just the sound? What sound? Like nothing. Like waiting. Ray lifted the handset. No light now. No saved messages, according to the little window that spoke its tiny truths. She listened to dead air long enough to get annoyed at herself and set it down. She took the torn spiral page from the trash bag again and studied the number. Hill Country Exchange 30 minutes south. She stepped outside and dialed it from her cell. A man answered on the second ring with the efficient politeness of someone who answered phones for a living. Cypress County Emergency Services. Detective Collins, Austin PD. I'm looking for any calls from a payphone near the Mesquite Star Lodge around 3 this morning. Hold. She listened to keyboard clicks. We have a hang-up at 3:12, recorded on the line. Number. Traced to a caller ID, obviously. Old hardware. Dispatch logged it as no voice contact. How long? 6 seconds. She hung up and stood very still. 6 seconds is not an accident. 6 seconds is someone holding the line, making sure the call went somewhere, and being told by fear or by somebody behind them to stop. She looked up at the corridor camera again and imagined it alive, blinking, swallowing the night without keeping any of it. She pictured a family of 4 passing under it like ghosts the camera chose not to see. By noon, the parking lot had drawn lookers. A man walking his dog and pretending to stare at the sky. A woman in a minivan who circled twice and left. A kid on a bike who wanted to ask questions but didn't. Ray sent the minivan to impound. She scrubbed the steering wheel for prints and got the filmy, unhelpful blur of 1,000 touches. She popped the glove compartment and found the expected registration. Insurance, gum that tasted like a mint, died of old age, and one unexpected thing. A receipt tucked behind the manual for the last oil change. It had been folded into a geometry of forgetfulness, and when she unfolded it, the date smiled up at her. Yesterday, a corner store gas stop 30 miles back. Paid by card, the cashier's initials in blue pen. Ray stared at the 4 blocky numbers of the time. 7:41 p.m. There. Trail had not been scrubbed. It had been written with the clarity of people who believed tomorrow existed. She took the receipt in a bag. She took photos of the tires. She looked at a smudge of red dust on the passenger side, the kind you get when you turn off onto a caliche. Road that leads nowhere. She let the smudge nag at her. In the office, Rich sat like a man guarding a secret at gunpoint with no gun. Is there a second entrance? Ray asked. Back alley? Service road? Trash pickup gate? Locked? Broken. And you don't cut keys after 10? We don't. But somebody cut one, Ray said softly, holding up the spare. Rich's mouth opened, closed. He looked like somebody had taken his story and bent it out of shape. Maybe from before my time. How long you been here? Long enough to forget when I started. He rubbed at a spot on the counter that wasn't there. Long enough to know people don't vanish. They just leave. Leave what? Trouble. Ray walked the property line. The chain-link fence sagged in the back, where weeds had learned to pretend they were trees. Beyond it, a scar of earth where a dumpster had lived for years. A box spring leaned against the fence like an exhausted person. Near the old dumpster pad, she saw a shallow rectangle of disturbed dirt, the way soil looks when something heavy lived there and moved. She crouched. The dirt smelled like old coffee grounds and motor oil. She found no footprints, which meant either the person who'd been here knew not to leave them, or the wind had scrubbed them clean. She found a rectangle of paper, corner down in the soil. She freed it carefully, brushed off grit with the back of a knuckle. Another placemat, the same kind as the one under the keys, folded into a crude envelope. Inside, nothing. The best. Kind of nothing, Ray thought. A space where something used to be. She imagined a metal cash box in that soil, the kind you buy at an office store when you want to pretend you're a bank. She imagined someone digging it up in the dark because dawn was coming. The payphone had been used at 3:12. Dawn would have. Threatened around 6:30. That gave a careful person 3 hours to erase an accident or a plan. When she looked up, she saw a smear on the outside of the payphone glass. A child's handprint. Not fresh, not old, just human. She took a photo of it and then another, the way you do for yourself as much as for the file, because sometimes you need to remind yourself that the case isn't a puzzle. It's people. On her way back through the corridor, Ray passed a boy, about Gabe's age, sitting on the stairs, watching her like he planned to look away if she looked back. You live here? She asked. He nodded, cat quick. Mom cleans. You see the family in 214? The girl had a purple backpack. What else? He watched the door to 214, like it might open itself if he stared hard enough. The boy asked me if the vending machine $8. I told him it likes 20's best. Ray almost smiled. Did you see them leave? No, he said, and then with the cruel accuracy of 14, but I heard a key drop, like someone catching and missing and catching again. When? Late, he said. After the storm of bugs hit the light, Ray looked up at the humming lamp and imagined the wild ping of moths and beetles and anything small and alive that thinks light is salvation. She thought of 2 keys in a hand that didn't belong to a Navarro. She thought of a call placed and ended, and of a spare key that smelled like the inside of a machine, and of a corridor camera that did nothing but stare. She stood in the doorway of 214 one last time before she left. The air still felt colder than the day could explain. She could see, in the cheap mirror above the dresser, a slice of the parking lot where their minivan had waited faithfully all night for doors that never opened. Behind her, the 2 keys lay where she'd repositioned them for photos, side by side like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence that didn't make sense. She slipped them into separate bags. She wrote their chain of custody on 2 separate lines, as if they were 2 people who'd given 2 different statements. As she left, she told Rich to lock the door and not to rent it until she said he could. He nodded, a man grateful to be told what to do. On the highway back toward Austin, the sky flexed from dishwater to bone and back again. Trucks passed like whales. Ray replayed the night in her head until the times began to lay across each other like tracing paper. 3:12 a.m., a call that lasted 6 seconds. 3:15, according to a cheap clock on a beige phone that had blinked. A key dropped after the bug storm started. A rectangle dug up where a cash box might have slept. 2 keys when there should have been 1. A room colder than it should be. A family that left nothing but intention. People don't vanish, she told herself. They get taken, or they get led, or they get scared enough to walk into the wrong darkness. Somebody had written a riddle in that room, and they wanted a reader. Her phone buzzed. The number on her screen was Hill Country again. She answered on the second ring. Detective Collins. A voice she couldn't place, male, older, the drawl worn thin by years of swallowing it, said, "You're looking at the wrong door." She sat up straighter. Who is this? The line clicked dead. She listened to nothing until the nothing felt like a threat. She looked at the highway shouldered with cedar scrub and thought about doors. Front doors locked, back gates broken, payphones that count as doors if you know who's on the other side. 2 keys, meaning there had been at least once upon a time 2 ways in. She turned the car around at the next median break and headed south, back toward a motel that pretended to be asleep. Somewhere between the hum of the tires and the buzz of that sign, a story had been buried. Someone had left clues that weren't breadcrumbs, so much as receipts, proofs of presence and absence, designed to be read later. She didn't know yet that in a rusted filing cabinet in the office closet, behind a stack of outdated rate cards, there waited a thin envelope she hadn't found. That inside it a gas receipt from a station 40 miles away was time-stamped 3:15 a.m. and signed in a hand that wasn't Luis Navarro's. She didn't know about the rectangle of dirt, where a lockbox had been, or what had been in it, or what had been lifted out before dawn. She only knew that a family of 4 had walked into a room and left nothing but order and air. She knew that whoever had moved through that room did not hurry. They tidied. They locked behind them. They made the bed after they erased the sleepers. And somewhere, she suspected, a second door she hadn't yet noticed still hung crooked and mostly closed, waiting to be opened by someone who understood keys. Ray didn't make it to the freeway the second time. She took the next exit, looped under the overpass, and let the tires hum her back to the Mesquite Star, like the car already knew the way. The office was darker than before. The neon from the sign pulsed through the blinds in slow, bruised breaths. Rich had a sports talk show turned low on a transistor radio like an alibi, his mouth moving on a sunflower seed that never seemed to shrink. He stiffened when she came in and stiffened again when she walked past the counter without asking, pulled the closet door, and stuck her shoulder into the swell of copy paper boxes until they budged. "You can't just," he started. "Stop." "Me," she said without turning, which shut him up. The second shelf held old rate cards for nights when the place pretended to be a bargain. Behind those, a bent metal file box posed as empty. When she lifted it, something slid inside with the thin sound of paper not wanting to be found. She cracked it with a thumbnail and shook out an envelope that had once been white. The motel logo on the corner had bled into a brown cloud. Inside, a single receipt. Fuel purchase, 3:15 a.m. October, a station on 281, but not the one north. This one 90 minutes south in a town the Navarros never reached. His signature at the bottom was loose and tall. It read Navarro if you wanted it to. It looked like someone writing with a glove on. Ray bagged it, dated it, felt her pulse climb. "Where'd you get the file box?" she asked, without changing her voice. "Been here longer'n me," Rich said. "I didn't put that there." She watched his mouth to see if it believed. His words. It did. That was either talent or truth. "Who else has keys to the closet?" he swallowed. "Owner, housekeeping, contract guys." "What contract guys?" "Maintenance," he said, as if the word explained men the color of drywall, who could make a place work and make it disappear. "We don't have a crew on payroll. Booth services. They do locks, ice machines, door closers, whatever breaks. You got a number?" "They find us," he said, which was the kind of sentence that made Ray's teeth itch. She copied it off a thumbed card taped inside the ledger cover. Booth services had a 210 number and a logo that could have been a cattle brand or a prison. Stamp. She stepped back into 214 and sat on the carpet, back against the wall where the headboard had left chewed grooves. She closed her eyes. The room thrummed low, the way empty places do when you listen long enough. She pictured a knock. Lise lifting his head. Marisol laying a hand on his arm that said, "Don't." She pictured a voice through wood that said, "Manager," or "Ice," or "Your taillight," or whatever lie gets a latch moved at 3 in the morning without waking a 7-year-old. She pictured the spare key next, the scrape of brass in brass, the quiet push of a door that had learned not to complain. She opened her eyes when a shadow passed the window. The boy from the stairs hovered there and flinched when she saw him, then recovered fast, chin up like an alley cat. "You again," she said. "You got a name? Diego?" "Diego, did you see anybody outside 214 last night who wasn't a Navarro?" He squinted at the parking lot like the answer might still be there. "Guy in a cap," he said finally. "Everyone here's got a cap," she said. "Baseball, not trucker. New, no sweat line." The specificity hit Ray like a small bright bell. "What color?" "Dark, not black. Navy, I think." He walked like he was allowed. "What time?" "Between 2 and 4, he said, shrugging. "Apology. Time's a rumor when you're 14. He carried a bag, not luggage, tool. "Long or short?" "Short," he said. "Like for the kind of tools that make doors do what you want." "You tell anybody?" He looked at her like she'd asked if he told the moon. "Nobody asks the kid who lives behind the ice machine," he said. She dug in her pocket, came up with a sheriff's office victim services card and a 20. She slid the card to him. "If you remember more, call the first number, not the second. The second rings to a desk that goes home at 5. The first one rings somebody who'll answer." He touched the card like it might bite and took the 20 with the solemnity of a sacrament. "You're gonna find him?" He asked. She didn't. "Lie." "I'm gonna find out what happened," she said, and he nodded like that was the only honest answer anyone ever gave him. The drive to booth services took her along a stretch of frontage road where businesses looked like leftovers metal, buildings with the wrong names on them. The sign on the lot's chain link read booth in red block letters and services in spray paint beneath, like the name had outlived the business plan. Inside, a bell tinkled from fatigue when she opened the door. A woman with hair like steel wool and a tattoo of a tiny wrench behind one ear looked up. "We closed," she said. Ray showed the badge. "I'm boring," she said. "You won't even remember me by lunch. I need the client list with Mesquite Star on it, plus whoever orders their lock sets." A woman's face moved through several opinions before landing on compliance. "I just do the desk," she said. "Desk is where the secrets are." Ray said, and the woman smiled despite herself, went to a back room, returned with a ring binder fat enough to stop a bullet. Ray flipped until she found Mesquite Star Lodge. The page had 5 invoices over 3 years ice machine repair, door closer replacement, 2 Reiki-all entries, and one that made the little hairs lift on Ray's arms. Cut spare master manager approval. The date, 2 months ago. The signature, a diagonal scrawl that wasn't Rich's cramped print. "Who's the manager?" Ray asked. "Owner's nephew is what we call him," the woman said. "Name?" "Evan Booth," she said. "Same Booth as the sign." "He's not my blood. Name's a coincidence or a lie. He pays cash." Ray took a copy of the page, asked for the work order. The woman brought a triplicate white, yellow, pink thing with blue lines and grease fingerprints. In the corner, an initial, EB next to it, a cell number that made Ray's stomach go tight. Hill Country Exchange. She dialed it in the parking lot. A man answered on the second ring. "Evan," he said, like people who expect trouble answer. "Looking for Evan Booth," Ray said, and let the badge carry through her voice. Silence thickened. "Who's this?" "Detective Collins." "Austin PD." A beat. Then, "Wrong county." "People disappear across county lines all the time," she said. "It's rude to make them wait." A click. Dead air. She stared at her screen like it had snubbed her. She called again. Voicemail. A man's voice in that practiced flatness. That tells you the person leaves messages like other people leave receipts. "You've reached Evan. Leave it." She didn't. She drove to the address the binder listed for owner's nephew. A P.O. box. A lie by definition. And then to the address on the Secretary of State filing for the Motels. LLC. A ranch gate off 281 with a keypad and a brand on the metal that looked like a star caught in barbed wire. No answer at the box. No way through the gate. She sat there with the heat rising off the hood and thought about locks and who loves them. On the way back, she stopped at a diner with sun-faded pie photos and a waitress whose name tag it belonged. To someone named Lorraine, long enough that it belonged to her now. Ray slid into a booth that had cracked along the seam and ordered coffee that tasted like it had forgiven people. She called the number the payphone had dialed at 312 again. Gave her credentials again. Listened to the same answer. 6 seconds, no voice, no trace. "Where's your call center?" she asked. "San Marcos," the dispatcher said. Who was on the board then? Hold. A new voice came on, older and sanded by years of nights. "This is Maggie." I had the board. Ray felt the strange relief of human connection press through the line. "Maggie," she said softly, "do you remember a hang-up just after 3? "I remember every hang-up," Maggie said, tone not unkind. This one sounded like a parking lot. Wind on a cheap receiver, a woman breathing, somebody saying "no, ma'am," like he was holding a door with a smile. "Then it died?" "Like a hand on it," Maggie said. "Not like fear, like obedience." The word sat on Ray's tongue like a bitter pill. She hung up, tipped Lorraine like the coffee had saved her life, and drove to visit Marisol's sister in South Austin because someone had to tell the family something, and Ray hated the way "we don't know yet" felt in her mouth. The apartment smelled like cumin and pine saw, the way places smell when hope and grief live together. The sister Aina had histrionics printed on her face and steel braided into her spine. 2 kids hovered in the doorway, quiet in the way kids get when adults are performing. Ray sat with Aina and said the promises you can make without lying. We're working it hard. We found a receipt that doesn't make sense. We think someone used a key that wasn't theirs. Aina stared at the fridge where Gabe's and Ice's photos were held by a magnet with a prayer on it. Luis would have fought, she said. He's not a man who opens the door because someone says manager. He opens for police. He opens for fire. He opens for his wife, Ray said gently, and Aina's face cracked in a way that made Ray hate her job for 5 seconds. On the way out, Ray's phone buzzed with a number she didn't know but recognized. Hill Country again. She answered and heard that same flattened male voice that had told her she was looking at the wrong door. "Detective," he said, forming the word like a dare. "You're quick. I told myself I'd stop if you weren't." "Evan," she said, "I'd thank you for the call if we were playing on the same side." "Sides are paper," he said, "and paper is all that matters. You, of all people, should respect the file." "I respect the people the file is about," she said. "Where are the Navarros?" Silence, long enough to hear a turn signal somewhere in his life. "You're chasing rooms," he said at last. "Rooms aren't where this ends." Then, where? In what the rooms sell? He hung up before she could say the word back to him. Receipts. Back at the station, she built a board the way detectives build altars. On the left, the Navarros. On the right, the Mesquite Star. Between them, thread, the duplicate receipt at 3:15 a.m., the call at 3:12, the spare master 2 months ago, the maintenance invoice, the Hill Country number that belonged to a man who liked locks and liked her attention. She put Diego's description of a clean cap in black marker and Maggie's word obedience in red, because some words are evidence. She asked a tech to pull stills from the only camera on the property that might have worked, the cracked dome above the office, safe expecting nothing, and getting a miracle. A reflection off the office window at 2:58 a.m. of a figure under the corridor light, hat brim low, head turned just enough to catch a pale blade of cheek. The image was trash for court and gold for a detective who believed in pattern. She printed it and taped it up. She stared at it until she could smell the motel again. Before she went home, she drove once more to the Mesquite Star to stand in the corridor where the moths had died and to press her palm to the cold door of 214 like a prayer. Rich had taped a do not rent paper over the number, which felt like theater, but she didn't fault him for wanting props. She walked to the back fence where the dirt remembered a box and crouched and touched the soil and felt. In the place where the ground was a fraction softer, the corner of paper that had escaped. She teased it out with tweezers. It was half a credit card slip older than the backlog in her email, the merchant copy for ice machine service. On the line where a signature should have lived, someone had stamped a name she had already started. To hate, E. Booth. She was standing when her phone buzzed one more time. A text, no contact, just words. "Stop digging, detective. The dirt out here doesn't bury. IT remembers." She stared at the screen long enough to see herself reflected there. Too small and too stubborn. Then she put the phone in her pocket, turned her face into the hum of the sign, and thought about dirt that remembered and paper that lied, and about a family whose toothbrushes were still dry. She didn't go home. She drove south on 281 with The windows cracked so the highway's breath could keep her awake. Past the ranch gate with the star, past the turnoff that led nowhere. Somewhere out there, a second door had opened for the Navarros. Somewhere out there, somebody had closed it behind them and made a bed like a benediction. She kept driving until the gaslight blinked. She pulled into a station with flies climbing the glass and a clerk who didn't like eye contact and asked him for the night. Manager's log for 1997, as if such a thing might exist, and laughed at herself because exhaustion makes you honest. On the way back to the car, she passed the receipt printer that coughed out proof for strangers and thought, I am going to make you tell the truth. The pump beeped finished. She slid the handle back into its cradle, took the thin slip it offered, and stared at the time it printed like a threat. 3:15 a.m., not because it was, but because the machine had been set wrong for years and nobody had fixed it. For a second, the world tilted the way a lie looks exactly like a fact if it's written neatly enough. She folded the slip and put it in her pocket, proof of nothing and a lesson in everything. When her phone rang again, she answered without looking, and a woman's voice she didn't know said, If you're Ray Collins, you need to come to room 6 at the Live Oak Inn on County Road 14. Don't bring uniform, bring cash. Then, the line went dead, and the night pressed in, and the sign at the Mesquite Star blinked. And for the first time all day, Ray felt something close to fear. She drove anyway. Ray Collins pulled the unmarked sedan into the gravel lot of the Live Oak Inn and cut the engine. The headlights died, leaving her in the soft hush of rural dark. Out here, the stars pressed so close, it felt like you could scrape your fingers across them. The only artificial light came from the sign out front, half its bulbs burned out. The word Live sputtering, the word Oak stubborn, the word Inn swallowed in shadow dot. It was after midnight. She had driven straight from the Mesquite Star down into Blanco County, her pulse drumming a rhythm too fast for the hum of tires. Whoever had called her had known her name, known her investigation, and asked her to come here alone. That was either courage or it was bait. The Live Oak Inn had been shuttered for a decade, boarded up after a meth bust that went sideways. But Ray knew the reputation stretched further back. She had read whispers in the archives lodgers who paid in cash and never checked out. Truckers who swore the back lot carried ghosts. Nothing on paper, of course. Only stories. Her boots crunched gravel as she stepped out, every instinct coiled. The motel sagged under its own history, paint blistered, windows cross-hatched with plywood. Room 6 sat halfway down the row. The door was closed, its number barely visible. She kept her hand near the holster as she approached. The air smelled of mildew and mesquite smoke, sharp enough to sting. A cicada droned somewhere close, but otherwise the night was silence. She knocked. Once the door groaned open an inch. No light spilled out, only a black square that breathed cool, stale air. Detective Collins? The voice was female, low and uncertain. Ray pushed the door wider, flashlight up. The beam caught on peeling wallpaper, a bed frame with no mattress, and a woman standing in the corner. She was maybe 60, hair iron gray, coat too heavy for Texas summer. Her eyes glittered like wet stone. You called me, Ray said carefully. The woman nodded. My name's Lorna. I worked here when the Live Oak still pretended to be a business. Nights, cleaning, laundry. She lifted her chin. I know what happened to the Navarros. Ray felt her pulse tighten. Tell me. Lorna looked past her toward the open door, toward the empty lot. Close it, she whispered. Ray hesitated, then swung the door shut. The room sank deeper into flashlight glow, dust glittering in the beam. They weren't the first family, Lorna said. Not by a long shot. Families came through all the time. tired, driving late. Somebody always told them to stop here. Somebody? Ray asked. The men with the caps, Lorna said, her voice going thin. Maintenance, they called themselves. But they didn't fix things. They collected things. Ray took a slow step closer. Collected? People, Lorna said simply. The word chilled the air. They used receipts, she went on. Always receipts, gas slips, diner tabs, motel stubs. They planted them, left them, sometimes gave them to us with cash. Told us if anyone asked, we'd seen the family check out. That paper was the truth. Didn't matter if the beds were still warm. Ray's throat tightened. The Navarros? They stopped at the Mesquite Star, like you know. But that wasn't the end. They were moved here. I saw them. Her voice broke. The kids were crying. The man was bleeding. The woman kept looking at the ground, like she knew if she looked at the men, she'd never look away again. Ray's light trembled against the wall. You're saying they were alive when they left the Mesquite Star? Yes, Lorna's eyes burned. And I saw them leave again, southbound, before sunrise. Same SUV, but not with the father driving. He was slumped in the passenger seat. The man in the cap was at the wheel. Ray's mind clanged with memory. Marlene at the Red Oak, describing the Halversons leaving behind a man in a cap. The echoes were too precise. Why didn't you come forward? Ray asked, sharper than she meant. Lorna flinched. Because the next day, there was an envelope under my door. Cash, and a receipt with my name on it. Gas station I'd never been. 2, signed like it was me. Proof I'd gone somewhere I hadn't. Proof I could vanish too. She shook her head. I kept my mouth shut. For 20 years, I kept it shut. But then I saw your name in the paper, chasing the Navarros. And I thought maybe the dirt was tired of keeping secrets. Ray lowered the flashlight. The silence of the room pressed against her ears. She believed the woman. The details, the weight of them, matched too neatly with what Ray already knew. Receipts as weapons, men with caps as shepherds of silence, families who checked in and never checked out. Why now? Ray asked. Lorna's face tightened. Because they're still out there. The men, the caps, the receipts. I saw one of them last week at the grocery in Blanco. Same face, not a day older. Ray's chest went cold. Where? Lorna gave her the name of a store on Highway 281, the time, the aisle. Ray wrote it down, even though she already knew she wouldn't forget. Detective, Lorna whispered suddenly. You're being watched. Ray turned. The flashlight beam swung across the wall. The door, the window except the plywood over the window, had a crack an inch wide. Footsteps scattered outside. Gravel popping. Ray shoved Lorna back, yanked her pistol free, and barreled through the door. The lot was empty. No cars, no shadows. Only dust drifting where tires had spun quick into the road. She stood there with the gun still hot in her hands, the stars spilling overhead, her breath ragged. Somewhere out there, eyes had been on her through that crack. Watching, measuring dot, when. She turned back. Lorna was trembling. They never leave, Detective, she whispered. They only wait. Ray drove back toward Austin as dawn cracked pale pink across the horizon. Lorna's words gnawed at her. Receipts, families, men in caps. It was a system, not an accident. A circuit of motels, each one a mouth that swallowed. Lives. Back at the station, Ruiz was waiting, circles under his eyes, coffee in his hand. He listened without interrupting as Ray poured out what she had heard. You think the Navarros were rerouted through the live oak? He asked finally. I don't think, Ray said. I know. Lorna saw them. Same pattern as the Halversons. Same man in a cap. Ruiz rubbed his forehead, so it's bigger than one motel. bigger than Mesquite Star. This is a chain, not hotels, Ray said. Not a brand. A chain of silence. Connected by men who know how to write lies on paper. She dropped the duplicate receipts onto the desk. And those receipts are their fingerprints. The evidence board grew thicker that day. Ray pinned Lorna's testimony beside Marlene's, beside Douglas Kerr's. 3 witnesses decades apart, all describing the same figure, the same method, the same silence. It wasn't coincidence. It was orchestration. By noon, Ray and Ruiz were driving south again, tracing the corridor of Highway 281, stopping at every shuttered motel that fit the pattern. Red Oak, Live Oak, Hillview. All gone to rot, but all carrying echoes. Ray could feel it in the air, like heat rising from asphalt. At Hillview Lodge, a vulture perched on the roof and turned its head slowly, as if it knew her name. The sign out front still had room numbers painted on wood. Ray stared at the faded 12 and thought about the McCaffreys, about Leah's note, about voices carved into walls. The motels weren't abandoned. They were graveyards. As the sun bled out of the sky, Ray pulled the car to the shoulder, staring at the long black line of 281, stretching endless in both directions. Somebody built this, she said. Somebody patient. Somebody who knew how. To erase families with ink and paper. Ruiz looked uneasy. And if they're still out there? Ray's jaw tightened. Then they already know we're coming. That night, she returned to her apartment. She locked the door, checked the windows, checked the hallway. Her nerves still hummed. She made coffee she didn't want and sat at the kitchen table surrounded by files, photos, slips of paper that whispered more lies than truths. When the knock came, she froze. 3 sharp raps. Deliberate. Her gun was in her hand as she approached. The peephole. The hallway was empty. Another knock. Softer. She opened the door an inch. A single envelope lay on the floor. No handwriting. No mark. She picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside was a receipt. Gas station. October 1997. 3:15 a.m. The name at the bottom was not Halverson, not Navarro. It was her own, Ray Collins. Her pulse roared. The letters scrawled. In her handwriting, but not by her hand. She staggered back into the apartment, the slip burning in her palm. The message was clear. The system had already written her into the story. And now, she was next. Detective Ray Collins didn't sleep that night. The receipt sat on her kitchen table like a venomous thing, the faded ink spelling her own name, as though she had filled the tank at some forgotten gas station nearly 30 years earlier. It was dated October 12, 1997, the very night the Halversons and the Navarros had vanished from their respective motels. It was impossible, absurd, and yet the slip of paper felt heavier than any piece of evidence she had ever handled. Whoever left it had forced her into their story, rewriting her existence into the same ledger of disappearances she had sworn to solve. Paper was the truth now. The receipts said so. And she was on the list. By sunrise, she was back at the precinct. Hair pulled into a tight knot, exhaustion scoring shadows beneath her eyes. Ruiz was already at his desk when she arrived, a stack of files spread before him. He looked up, eyebrows climbing when he saw her expression. "You look like you've been awake for a week." She dropped the envelope in front of him. "Read." It? Ruiz slid the paper free, scanned it, then looked at her again with disbelief hardening into fear. "This is your name." His voice had gone low, almost reverent. "Your name." 1997. Ray sat across from him, folding her arms to hide the tremor in her hands. They're escalating. They're not just planting trails for families anymore. They're writing me into their history. Ruiz leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Which means they know exactly who you are, where you live, what you're chasing. This isn't just intimidation, it's invitation. They want you inside the story. Ray exhaled sharply, forcing the air from her lungs. Then maybe it's time we stop following their trails and drag them into the light. She gestured toward the board covered in receipts, photos, and motel names. Every case, every disappearance, it all traces back to the same corridor of motels. And they all share one name, Mid-South Services. Ruiz nodded grimly. The maintenance contractors. The cover, Ray corrected. They weren't fixing plumbing. They were fixing narratives. Moving families through rooms, erasing them, and writing the receipts that proved they'd left. They spent the morning tearing through every document tied to the company. On paper, Mid-South had dissolved in 2001, sold to a shadow firm out of Waco called Lonier Maintenance. From there, the trail fractured into dozens of shell companies, all using the same P.O. box, all with signatures bearing the same initials. V.K.S. Ray stared at the blocky, deliberate scrawl. Victor K.S., whoever he is, he's been authoring these families out of existence for decades. Ruiz tapped the desk. Then maybe he's still around. Maybe the man in the cap isn't just some hired hand. Maybe he's VKS himself. That thought gnawed at Ray all afternoon. If the blurred figure in witness memories, the man always behind the wheel, was also the architect of the entire scheme, then she was hunting not a phantom, but a conductor, someone who had orchestrated every silence, every falsified trail. And if he had already written her name into the record, then he was closer than she dared imagine got by dusk. Ray and Ruiz drove south again, retracing the length of Highway 281. They pulled off at the ruins of the Hillview Lodge, the last of the motels. On their list, the building sagged against the twilight, its windows boarded, its roofline fractured like broken teeth. Yellow tape still fluttered where the county had half-heartedly sealed it off, but otherwise the place was abandoned to weeds and silence. Ray parked at the edge of the lot, scanning the rows of doors. Her pulse tightened when she spotted the number 12. The stories of the McCaffrey family echoed in her mind. The note Leah had scratched into plaster, the plea hidden under floorboards. "Let's go," she said, sliding out of the car. They pried the door open with a crowbar, stale air spilling, out thick with mold and dust. Their flashlights swept the room, stripped bed frame, graffiti on the walls, a dresser collapsing into itself. Above the outline of the headboard, the words still scarred deep into plaster. "We stayed here, we didn't leave." Ray's breath caught as she traced the grooves with gloved fingers. They carved this with desperation. They wanted someone to find it. Ruiz swallowed hard. And someone did you. In the corner, Ray's beam caught on something new. The wallpaper had peeled back to reveal wood beneath, and carved faintly into the wood was another phrase, almost too faint to read. She leaned close, squinting. "Tell her she's next." The words clawed at her spine like ice water. They knew. She whispered. They've always known someone would come digging. Ruiz's face paled. "Detective, that's a message for you." Ray's mind raced. Someone had etched those words years ago, or maybe weeks ago. The dust obscured everything, but the intention was clear. She was not just investigating the motel's victims, she was being invited to join them. That night, Ray refused to go home. Instead, she drove back to the city and checked into a chain hotel under a false name. She double-locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and spread the receipts across the desk. Her eyes blurred from fatigue, but she forced herself to study. Each slip, patterns emerged. Locations rotated, but always within a 50-mile radius. Times clustered around the dead hours between 2 and 4 in the morning. And always the names, families, salesmen, travelers written in loops and strokes that mimicked authenticity, but never quite aligned with reality. She flipped back to the one with her own name. The handwriting trembled with familiarity, the loops uncannily close to her own. Whoever had written it had studied her, mimicked her, until the forgery looked natural. Her phone buzzed. She froze. An unknown number lit the screen. One message. Check the window. Ray's pulse pounded. She approached slowly, gun in hand, and peeled the curtain back a sliver. A man stood in the parking lot below, leaning casually against a dented sedan. His head was tilted toward her window. A baseball cap shadowed his face. Her stomach dropped. The man in the cap. He lifted a hand in a mock salute, then slid into the car and drove off without haste, as if confident she would never follow. Ray stood frozen long after the taillights vanished. Whoever he was, he knew where she slept. And he wanted her too. No, he knew. The next morning, Ruiz found her in the precinct break room, staring into a cup of untouched coffee. She told him what she had seen. His jaw tightened. Then it's him. The same man every witness described. He's real. And he's taunting you. Ray nodded slowly. He's not hiding anymore. He wants me to chase him. She lifted her gaze to Ruiz. And I will. But not blindly. We need leverage, something that ties him to Mid-South, to the motels, to the receipts. Something that breaks the paper's story. Ruiz exhaled. And if he's already written you into it? Ray tightened her grip on the coffee cup until it shook. Then I'll rewrite it. Detective Ray Collins had been chasing shadows for months. But that morning, she realized the shadows were chasing back. The man in the cap had shown himself, not just through photographs or whispered testimonies, but in the flesh, standing beneath. Her hotel window, like a character stepping straight out of a nightmare. That image gnawed at her, the way he didn't run, didn't hide, simply acknowledged her with a mocking salute, and then drove away. It was confidence, arrogance, but also something else. An invitation. He wanted her to follow, wanted her to step fully into the trap he had been weaving for decades. She refused to give him the satisfaction. Instead, she immersed herself in the paper trail again, scouring every receipt, every registration card, every carbon copy that linked the vanishings along Highway 281. Dozens of names surfaced, most familiar from case files she had already cross-referenced. But in the bottom of the stack, buried under yellowing pages, was something new. A diner slip dated March 2000, signed Patrick McCaffrey. Ray's pulse kicked. The McCaffreys, the family whose daughter Leah had scratched desperate words into the plaster of room 12. She remembered the child's handwriting, the note hidden beneath the floorboards. If you find this, we didn't leave. But the receipt in her hand was different. The handwriting was too neat, too deliberate, as though written by someone practiced in forgery. And the diner it supposedly came from had burned down in 2005. If this slip was real, it meant the McCaffreys had been alive long enough to sign. It or someone wanted investigators to believe they had. She bagged the receipt, logged it, but her mind wouldn't let it rest. Every forged trail seemed less about confusing police and more about ownership. Whoever was behind this wasn't just erasing families. He was writing them into his ledger, claiming them like chapters in a book only he controlled. That night, Ray drove back to the Hillview Lodge. The place had become a magnet for her thoughts. Its sagging frame, a reminder that silence wasn't empty. It was curated, maintained. She parked with her headlights off, listening to the creak of the old sign swaying in the wind. The motel loomed against the horizon, its windows like dead eyes. She knew she shouldn't be there alone, but instinct told her she wasn't there. To collect evidence. She was there to see if the motel would speak again. Inside, the air stank of mildew and stale smoke. Her flashlight cut through the dark, sweeping across stripped wallpaper and collapsed furniture. She traced her steps back to room 12. The carved words, "We stayed here. We didn't leave," still scarred the wall. But when she crouched near the corner where Leah's note had been hidden, she noticed something else. The floorboard she had, pried up weeks earlier, had been shifted again. Someone had returned. Her stomach tightened as she eased it free. Inside the gap was another folded piece of paper, brittle and yellowing. Hands shaking, she opened it. This time, the handwriting wasn't a child's. It was blocky, deliberate, eerily similar to the initials on the Mid-South records. The note read, "You're digging in graves that aren't yours. Stop, or I'll write you into the next page." Ray's throat went dry. He had been here, maybe recently. He knew she would return. And he was leaving her messages like a cat leaving carcasses for its prey. She shoved the note into an evidence sleeve and forced herself to breathe. The motel wasn't just a stage for past tragedies. It was still in use, still active. And if she stayed too long, she might become part of its story. When she returned to the precinct, Ruiz nearly slammed his coffee cup down when she told him, "You went back there alone?" His voice was sharp, almost breaking. "Ray, he's watching you. He's probably been inside that place every night since you first stepped foot in it." She met his glare evenly. "And now we know it. He wants me to stop, which means I'm close." Ruiz shook his head. "Or he wants you to think you're close. You can't outsmart someone who's been perfecting this game for 30 years. Ray leaned forward, her voice steady. "Games end, Ruiz, even the ones that last decades." For the next week, they poured every resource into Mid-South. Services, old contracts, tax filings, court records. Finally, they found something tangible. A notary record from 1995. A deed for a small parcel of land outside Waco, signed by Victor K.S. and witnessed by a retired clerk named Dean Lassell. The name wasn't much, but it was more than they'd ever had. Ray drove to the retirement complex where Lassell now lived, her pulse tight with anticipation. The old man was frail, tethered to an oxygen tank, but his eyes sharpened when Ray showed him the signature. "Yes," he rasped. "I remember him, tall, thin. Always wore a cap indoors. He had men with him, never spoke, just watched. They weren't workers, they were enforcers." Made the room feel colder. Ray leaned forward. "What did you want?" "With the land?" Lassell coughed into a tissue. Said he was expanding his business, but he paid cash for everything. No paper trail but what I signed. Ray's chest tightened. "Did he ever threaten you?" Lassell's gaze drifted to the floor. His hand trembled as he tugged at the oxygen tube. A week later, I found a receipt in my mailbox. Gasoline. Same date I notarized his deed. It had my signature on it, but I'd never been there. His voice cracked. That was his way of telling me he owned me too. Ray felt the weight of his words settle like a stone. The receipts weren't just for the families. They were a weapon of silence, a method of control, a way of writing people into false histories until they doubted their own reality. She thanked Lassell, but when she returned to her car, she sat behind the wheel for nearly 10 minutes, shaking. This wasn't just about missing families. It was about rewriting the past itself. That evening, she avoided her apartment. She checked into another hotel under a different name, but even there, she didn't feel safe. She set up a corkboard against the wall, pinning every receipt, every note, every photograph into place. The web sprawled wider with each edition, a lattice of paper trails and vanishings stretching across 3 decades. At the center, always, was the man in the cap. She stared at his blurred face in the grainy photographs until her eyes ached near. Midnight, a knock rattled her door. Sharp, deliberate. She froze, gun in hand, and crept forward. Peering through the peephole, she saw nothing. Empty hallway. But when she opened the door an inch, an envelope slipped through the gap. She snatched. It slammed the door, and locked every bolt dot inside were photographs. Black and white, grainy. The first showed the Halversons loading luggage into their SUV in 1997. The second was of the McCaffreys at a diner, their faces blurred as though caught mid-motion. But the third made her blood run cold. It was of her, standing in the weeds, outside the Hillview Lodge just hours earlier, crouched over the floorboard where she had found the note. Someone had been there, close enough to photograph her, watching her every move. She dropped the photos onto the desk, her chest heaving. This wasn't intimidation anymore. It was possession. He was documenting her the same way he had documented the families, adding her to his ledger, writing her into the motel's story one photograph at a time. Ray pressed her palms against the desk, grounding herself. If she faltered now, if she surrendered to fear, she'd be erased like the rest. But if she pushed harder, followed the paper trail to its end, she might finally crack open the silence. She whispered into the stale hotel air, "You've been writing the story for 30 years, but I'm taking the pen now." Detective Ray Collins barely slept after the photographs were slid under her hotel door. She kept replaying the grainy image of herself, crouched in the weeds, flashlight beam catching dust, completely unaware that someone was close enough to capture her. That was the detail she couldn't let go of. Not just that she was being watched, but that her observer was bold enough to get within 30 feet of her without leaving a trace. Whoever it was wanted her to know she wasn't the hunter anymore. She was being cataloged, documented, written into the same ledger of disappearances she had been chasing for months, dot by sunrise. She sat in Ruiz's office, the photographs spread across his desk. His jaw clenched as he examined each one. "This isn't just intimidation," he said. "This is escalation. He's putting you in the same narrative as the families. He's showing you the process in real time." Ray nodded, exhaustion lining her face. "He wants me to feel the story before he closes it." Ruiz leaned back, his expression tight. "Then maybe it's time we stop chasing paper and start chasing the man." They decided on a new strategy. No more reacting to the notes and receipts. They would set a trap. Ruiz suggested using the old Hillview Lodge as bait. It was the last active site, the one the McCaffrey family had vanished from. The place had a gravity of its own, pulling both investigators and predators back into its orbit. If the man in the cap was still haunting the motel circuit, he would come back to Hillview. Ray hesitated. Every instinct told her she was walking into his territory, but she also knew there was no other way. "We control the ground," she finally said. "We set up surveillance, wait for him to show himself." Ruiz nodded grimly. "But this time, we'll be ready." 2 nights later, they moved in. Forensic techs planted motion-triggered cameras inside the rotting rooms and along the perimeter of the property. Microphones hid inside old air-conditioning vents. Officers disguised as maintenance workers loitered in nearby vehicles. From a distance, the Hillview Lodge looked abandoned, sagging and hollow. But beneath the decay was a trap wired with eyes and ears. Ray insisted on being inside. Ruiz argued against it, but she wouldn't budge. "He'll never appear unless I'm here," she told him. "He wants me in the story." She chose room 12, the chamber scarred with Leah's desperate carvings. Sitting inside, it felt like sitting in a mausoleum, the air thick with mildew and memory. She positioned herself at the broken dresser, a decoy laptop open, pretending to catalog evidence while her earpiece crackled faint updates from Ruiz outside. Hours passed. The night deepened. Crickets sang from the roadside grass. And then silence. Her earpiece hissed softly. Ruiz's voice cut through. "Camera 3, south perimeter. We've got movement." Ray's pulse spiked. She shut the laptop and killed her flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. The live feed transmitted to her tablet showed a figure emerging from the tree line, tall, lean, baseball cap pulled low. He moved with unsettling calm, as though walking into a place he had already memorized. The cameras caught the faint glint of something metallic in his hand. "Do we move in?" Louise asked. Ray whispered back, "Not yet." The figure approached the motel slowly, pausing to glance at each window. He wasn't searching. He was selecting. Finally, he stopped outside room 12. Ray's chest tightened. He was choosing her. She gripped the pistol holstered at her thigh, her finger brushing the trigger guard. The doorknob rattled. She held her breath. Then, with a deliberate push, the door creaked open. The man stepped inside, his silhouette framed by the faint glow of the highway behind him. His presence filled the space instantly. Even in the dim light, she could see his mouth curl into something like a smile. "You've been diligent," he said softly, his voice flat and unhurried. "Most don't make it this far." Ray leveled her pistol at him. "Victor K.S.?" He chuckled, the sound low and humorless. "Names are just signatures, detective. You, of all people, should know. How easy those are to forge." She steadied her aim. "What did you do to the families?" He tilted his head, almost curious. "The better question is, what did the families do to themselves? They checked in. They stayed. They let me write them." He tapped the brim of his cap. "Paper is truth, detective. Flesh is forgettable." Ray's stomach twisted. "You forged their trails. You erased them on paper until no one remembered." "Not erased," he corrected calmly. "Authored. If a receipt says you left at 3:15 a.m., you did. If the motel log shows you checked out, you're gone. That's the beauty of paper. It doesn't argue." The calmness in his tone unsettled her more than anger ever could. It was rehearsed, ritualistic, as if he had spoken these words 100 times before. She kept her gun steady, but her mind raced. He wasn't armed, not visibly, but the confidence in his stance told her he didn't need to be. He had something else, Dot. Then her earpiece crackled. Ruiz's voice strained. "We've got movement north perimeter. 2 more figures. They're circling." Her pulse spiked. He hadn't come alone. The man in the cap took a step closer, unflinching despite the gun pointed at his chest. "You've been following breadcrumbs. But breadcrumbs aren't food. They're bait." Before she could react, the power cut. The room plunged into total darkness. The cameras went dead, her earpiece filled with static. A heavy thud shook the wall, as if someone outside had yanked the generator. Lee's flashlight beam flared on, slicing through the dark. The man in the cap was gone. "Ruiz?" She hissed into her mic. No response. Static. A sound scraped from the far side of the room, the bathroom door creaking open. Ray pivoted, pistol raised. A shadow slipped out. Another figure, taller, broader, wearing a hood. He lunged. Ray fired once, the shot deafening in the small room. The figure staggered, but another slammed into her from behind, knocking the gun from her grip. She crashed to the floor, breath driven from her lungs. Hands grabbed her wrists, cold and calloused, binding them with cord. She fought, twisting, kicking, but another blow to her ribs stole her breath. The man in the cap reappeared in the doorway, calm as ever. "Now you understand," he said softly. "You don't catch the author. The author catches you." The world blurred as a cloth pressed over her mouth, the sharp sting of chemicals flooding her nose. Her vision tunneled. The last thing she saw was his faint smile, eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his cap. When Ray woke, The air smelled of mold and gasoline. Her wrists were bound behind her, ankles lashed tight. She lay on a filthy carpet, the buzzing of a failing fluorescent light above her. Slowly, her eyes adjusted. She was back in room 12. The carved words loomed above her on the wall. We stayed. Here. We didn't leave, but she wasn't alone. A shape moved in the corner. A young woman, her hair tangled, her clothes thin and torn. Her eyes were wide, distant, but unmistakably alive. Ray's breath caught. "Leah," she whispered. The woman blinked, her lips parting. Her voice was fragile, barely audible. "He said you'd join us." Leah hovered in the corner as if the dimness were a shoreline she couldn't cross. Arms wrapped around her ribcage, bare feet rimmed with grime. Ray rolled onto her side, rope scraping skin, forcing her breath to steady. "Leah, my name is Ray," she said softly, measuring each word. "I work with the police. We found your note under the floorboard." The girl's eyes flicked up like startled birds, recognition flashing and then vanishing behind the practiced emptiness. "Notes are bad," she whispered. "Notes mean punishment." "He says paper tells on you." Ray swallowed. "He says paper is truth, right? He says he's the author." Leah nodded once small, reluctant. "But your paper saved you," Ray said. "It brought me here." Footsteps scuffed beyond the door. Leah flinched so hard her shoulder hit the wall. The handle rattled, and the man in the cap slipped in, followed by the larger one with the hood, his sleeve crudely taped above a bloodied bicep where her bullet had grazed him. The cap tilted at Ray, a shadowed smile. "You met our quiet girl," he said with a gentleness that skimmed cruelty. "She remembers, so others don't have to. That's her gift." Ray kept her face blank. "You built an economy out of forgetting," he shrugged. "An archive. A different thing." He set a battered briefcase on the dresser and snapped it open with a showman's flair. Bundled receipts, motel slips, registers like scripture. "This is how history is made now, Detective Collins. Not in courthouses. In offices with cheap paper and long memories." He glanced toward Leah, and his tone cooled. "Back to your room." Leah didn't move. Something stubborn and childlike settled in her jaw. The hooded man took a step, but Ray spoke faster. "She left me a message. She isn't yours anymore." The cap's head turned a hair. The room's buzzing light seemed to vibrate with the pause. "She's exactly mine," he said. "She's the table you write on, the wall you carve." He nodded to the hooded man, who grabbed Leah's wrist, not roughly, but with the familiarity of routine, and steered her through the bathroom to the Jack and Jill doorway Ray hadn't noticed, a slit of darkness that smelled like wet concrete. The man in the cap watched Ray watching the door. "Tunnels," he said, conversational. "This place was built over messes. Drains, storm cells, whatever the county forgot to map. Men like me learned to read omissions." Ray flexed against the rope behind her back, counting fibers, willing them to shift. "You left photographs at my hotel," she said. "Why?" "To keep you moving," he said. "A still detective is harder to place. A moving one leaves footprints." He closed the briefcase, then opened it again, extracting a single receipt and holding it by one corner like a magic trick. "Here's your footprint, just in case," he murmured, sliding it into his jacket. "If you disappear tonight, you pumped gas at 2:06 a.m. on 281 and drove north. Everyone will nod politely. The paper will say you did." Ray forced a dry laugh. "You've been doing this for decades. You ever get tired of your own sermon?" He rolled a pale shoulder. "It isn't a sermon. It's a ledger." He leaned down, and for the first time she saw his eyes clearly still, light, the kind of gaze that catalogued rather than felt. "You weren't supposed to find her," he added, almost pitying. "The girl. She was an unfinished page we turned into a blank one. It took years. She's not blank, Ray said. She's bleeding through. He stood. We'll see. He gestured toward the door, and the hooded man returned alone, breathing harder, a smear of damp clay on his boot that told Ray the tunnels were real. The cap flicked his gaze at Ray's ropes. Tighter, he said, and stepped into the hall. The hooded man crouched behind her, tugging at the rope. In the pressure and scrape, Ray felt something give not the rope, her restraint. Leah had brushed past earlier, and Ray hadn't imagined the brief cold against her fingers. Now her palm met it, a sliver of glass the size of a thumbnail, edges wicked. Leah hadn't disobeyed by refusing to move. She'd delivered a tool. The hooded man pulled the rope snug, tied a harsh knot. "Scream, and I'll break your teeth," he muttered, breath sour with cigarettes. "Won't matter to paper, but it'll matter to you." He left. The door clicked. Ray counted to 30 while the footsteps faded, then to 60 while the corridor quieted. She tilted her wrists, dragging skin over glass. The first slice burned bright. She bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste copper, sawing, the shard slick. The buzzing light wobbled. From the bathroom came a damp echo, the exhale of a building that had learned to breathe. She worked faster. The rope hissed. Fibers surrendered one by one. A thud from above. Then a thud closer. A door shutting 2 rooms down. Voices low, male. She imagined a map, the way Kays would draw it, circles of influence around each point. If she failed here, she wouldn't vanish into myth. She'd be footnoted out of existence. With a final jerk, the rope loosened. Her wrists slipped free, raw and sticky. She rolled to her hip, pulled her knees to her hands, sliced the ankle cord, and pressed against the wall to stand. The room wavered, a tilt-a-whirl of dust motes and old cigarette ghosts. She crouched by the dresser and fished behind it for the pistol case's man had kicked nothing. Her fingers brushed something else, a rusted flathead screwdriver, stiff with paint. Not a gun, but a wedge. She tucked the glass shard into her sleeve, palmed the screwdriver, and padded for the bathroom, breath caged high in her throat. Jack and Jill door was ajar, the dark beyond heavier than the room. The smell intensified earth, mildew, the metallic tang of old pipes. "Leah?" Ray whispered. A breath answered. A shape detached from the dark and resolved into the girl. She had a key ring clutched in one hand and a strip of thread in the other, the kind used to stitch hemmed curtains. "They count keys," she whispered. "He counts everything. Can you get us out?" Leah's head tilted as if calculating distance the way captives measure time, by drip and groan. "There's a hatch," she said, "under the laundry. He hides the new paper there." Ray almost smiled. "Underground archive. Of course. Show me." Leah shook her head, panic flickering. "He's in the hall. He listens. He said no more running. He said I'm a ledger now, not a girl." "You wrote a note under a floorboard," Ray said softly. "Girls do that. Ledgers don't." Leah's chest hitched once. A child's almost sob strangled into silence by years of not being allowed to make sound. She nodded. They slipped into the narrow passage. Ray's hand on Leah's shoulder, the world immediately contracting. Pipes sweating, concrete damp. A low hummed the generator case his man had killed for the cameras, pulsing somewhere like a heart murmuring in a chest. The passage bent left, then right, then squeezed to a crouch. Leah moved without a flashlight, steps careful and memorized. "I used to walk without counting," she whispered. "Then he taught me to count. I can count without numbers now." "How long have you been down here?" Ray asked, voice athread. "Time is smoke," Leah said. "He blows it, and it goes." They reached a horizontal grate barely above the floor, black with lint. Leah's fingers flew over the screws, like a pianist remembering scales. He changes this sometimes, she said. So my hands keep remembering. The grate came free with a sigh. Beyond it, a crawl space opened into a hunched chamber lined with metal cabinets, their doors magnet stamped with dates and codes. Ray almost laughed despite the bile in her throat. An altar of paper underground. A kingdom of lies that mice had nibbled at the corners. Leah crawled in first, Ray after her. The cabinets whispered when Ray brushed them, thin edges hissing. She wanted to rip them open, flood the hallway with truth, but a sound above shifted her focus, the hollow boof of a door closer, returning to frame. Voices now, closer. She go for the tunnels, a man said, bored. They all go for the tunnels. Case's voice answered, still calm. If she does, we'll offer her to the highway. Keep your hands clean. Thumbprints are messy. Leah's hand found rise in the dark, a small electric wire. He drops paper, Leah whispered. Like bread, Ray said. Like chains, like glue. Leah pulled her toward a rectangle of lighter dark, a hatch rimmed by a seam of daylight. The laundry. They could surface there. Ray slid the screwdriver into the seam and twisted. The wood complained, nails yawning, and a rush of dust fell that tasted like dryer lint and old sheets. The hatch gave an inch. Stop, Leah breathed. Footsteps crossed above. 2 sets. Then the cough of a man who smoked too much hooded elbow wound. Ray thought instinctively. She waited until their wake passed and pried again. The hatch popped up and teetered. Ray blinked into a low ceiling. Room clogged with old washers and a sagging sorting table. The motel had left the skeleton of industry behind, as if the place still expected guests. She eased herself up, then reached back for Leah. The girl took her hand and climbed. A whistle sounded down the hall, not a tuna signal. Then the slam of a door their room, and the skitter of something tossed. They'll smell blood, Leah said suddenly, voice scissoring. He says you follow iron. We follow movement, Ray said, and scanned the room. A row of dirty hotel uniforms slumped from hooks like defeated men. In the corner, a steel door padlocked and painted over. An emergency exit? No time. She crossed to an interior window and peered into the corridor. The camera's dead red eye stared blankly. 2 men lingered by room 12, one heavyset, one thin with a snake's posture. KS was nowhere in sight. Ray breathed through her nose and began inventorying objects the way her academy instructors had drilled. Anything that cuts. Blinds, blocks. A bottle of bleach under a sink. Powdered laundry soap. A canvas bag of clothespins. We need a noise away from here, she said. Leah slipped to the old washers and spun one of the dials. Nothing. Power still cut. Ray grabbed the bleach, unscrewed the cap, and doused a rag. The smell climbed into her sinuses like a fist. She nodded toward the corridor. If they come in here, go back through the hatch. Crawl until the air tastes like dirt. Keep going. Leah's gaze held. Will you follow? I need to make space, Ray said. Then I'll be behind you. Leah's lips trembled. He says people who promise choose the paper's side. Ray almost said I'm not him, and realized Leah had heard that phrase before whispered by people who meant it to be true. I'm choosing you, Ray said instead, and meant it. She cracked the laundry door an inch and slid into the hall. The men by room 12 stiffened and drew, one lifting a flashlight, beam slicing toward her face. She flung the bleach rag. Lee. Man shrieked, light blizzarding across the ceiling as his eyes burned. The second lunged, arms wide, and Ray ducked, stabbing the screwdriver into his thigh. He folded with a curse, and she jammed past them, the hallway compressing into a tunnel of peeling floral wallpaper and the metallic taste of adrenaline. She's loose. Someone bellowed. Radios crackled. A door at the far end burst open case. Cap low, expression almost curious, as if watching a chess piece make a clever but doomed move. "Ms. Collins," he called evenly. "There's an easier way. Write it on a receipt." Ray called back and cut left through an open room into the gutted lobby. Light from the parking lot leaked in through the cracked glass of the entrance. For a heartbeat, she saw the world outside police, sawhorses abandoned, Ruiz's unmarked car dark and empty, highway beyond hypnotic. The front doors rattled. Someone had chained them tight from the outside. She was in the belly. The motel wanted to keep its meal. KS entered the lobby at a stroll. He had the briefcase again, absurdly calm mid curses and the wet thud of men recovering behind him. "You're performing," he said, conversational. "It reads well, but performance is theater. Paper is law." Ray backed toward the reception desk, the screwdriver slick in her palm. "Leah is out," she lied. His eyebrow ticked. "Is she?" He set the briefcase on the counter and flipped the clasps. "Tell me, detective, if I put your name on enough slips, in enough places, who do you think they'll believe your voice or 100 documents that say you are elsewhere?" "Bodies believe me," Ray said. "Rooms do. They remember. Rooms forget." He said, "We teach them." He pulled something from the case and held it up. A motel registration card, crisp blank lines waiting. He clicked a pen and wrote with precise block letters, "Collins, Ray." He dated it. "Check-in complete," he murmured. "Now you only need to leave." The pen slid into a different posture. She saw the switchblade an instant before it snapped. He didn't throw it. He didn't lunge it. Wasn't his style. He advanced with a patient confidence that said, "I've done this 100 quiet times." Ray shoved the reception stool toward him and bolted for the hallway, the sound of boot soles and the clang of the fallen stool colliding behind her. Back through the laundry, through the hatch, down into the concrete throat. "Leah!" She hissed, kicking the grate behind them into place, spinning the screws with frantic fingers. The girl's answering breath came from the dark like a moth's wing. "He chained the front," Ray whispered. "We take the earth." "The earth." "Eat slow," Leah said. "Then we move fast." Voices thudded above. The motel suddenly a drum. A flashlight beam knifed through the grate and slid off. "Nada," a voice said. "She's not in laundry anymore." A second later, the faintest rasp as if someone's hand patted the floor where Ray's heat still lingered. Case's voice. Close enough to salt the air. "No, she's here." She learned to read omissions, too. Ray put a finger to her lips in the dark. Leah couldn't see and tugged the girl forward. The tunnel bent, dipped, narrowed until Ray's shoulders scraped cement. The hummed generator returned, nearer now, the base of a cheap engine. The passage opened into a low vault, seated with metal bins and a battered table stacked with date. Stamps, ink pads, ledger books swollen with humidity. The smell of solvent punched harder here. Ray's stomach rolled. An underground print shop for reality. She swept the table with her forearm. Stamps crashed, ink bled in black constellations. Leah flinched back, then stepped forward with a sudden ferocity that surprised Ray, grabbing a ledger and hurling it to the floor. Pages fanned open, a blizzard of proof. "Bad paper," she whispered, almost a prayer. "Bad paper, bad paper." Footsteps again. Closer, a scrape against cement. Ray spun, searching for exits. Found a maintenance ladder bolted to a wall where the ceiling thunked lower, a vertical slit into darkness. "Up," she breathed. Leah grabbed the rungs and climbed, feet slipping, hands catching. Ray followed. One rung, 2, 3, her ribs shrieking where the hooded man had slammed her. Below, silhouettes poured into the vault, flashlights igniting blisters of white. A hand clamped Ray's ankle, and she kicked, connecting with bone. A curse rose, ugly and close. "Shoot?" someone asked, and Casey's voice drifted up like a teacher chiding. "Not in the archive." Leah reached the top and slammed her shoulder. Against a hatch, it didn't budge. Ray scissored higher, shouldered next to her, and they shoved together. Nails shrieked. Wood split. The hatch coughed open to cold night air and a tongue of creosote. They spilled onto a tarred surface, rooftop. The Hillview Lodge's spine stretched beneath them, patched and soft. The highway hummed beyond. Police lights were absent the perimeter that had been there earlier gone, withdrawn or pulled. For a flicker of a second, Ray's heart plunged. Then she saw a single unmarked sedan tucked in the tree shadows, lights. Dark, Ruiz stubborn, waiting. "Down the back," Ray said, pointing to a rusted fire escape whose ladder hung askew. Leah crawled to the lip without looking down, trusting a void the motel had trained her to fear. Ray lowered her with both hands, then followed, the metal biting. Halfway down, a door banged open below, and a flashlight jerked up, blinding. "Police!" a voice shouted. Ray froze, vision bleaching. "Ruiz?" she called. "Ruiz?" The light steadied. "Ray?" It was him, hoarse, disbelieving. "Where the hell?" "No time," she barked. "He's in the tunnels. There's an archive under laundry, date stamps, receipts, everything." A crack split the night, metal pinned near her ear. A second shot. Not Ruiz, from the roof. KS had reached the hatch and fired into the dark like punctuation. Ray and Leah dropped the last 12 feet and hit the ground hard. Ruiz grabbed Leah, tucking her behind the sedan's open door, then swung the door wide as makeshift cover. Another shot spanged off the car's frame. "We're outgunned," he hissed. 2, maybe 3 with him. "Then we don't trade bullets," Ray said. "We trade paper." "What?" "Make them choose what to protect." She pointed to the back of the motel. "He'll save the archive before he saves himself." Ruiz blinked, then nodded like a man who'd learned to trust her leaps. He sprinted low toward the laundry wing. Ray flanked, drawing the hooded man's fire with a broken piece of Hivik duct she hurled into the weeds. The shot chased the sound. From the laundry door, Ruiz lit a flare and tossed it through the threshold. Smoke belched, orange licking up. Lint-dry walls. An alarm somewhere coughed to life and died. The building took a shallow breath, like an old smoker surprised into coughing. KS's silhouette froze against the rooftop lip. For the first time, his stillness fractured. He looked at the fire, at the dark where the archive sat, at Ray, at Leah crouched by the car, and calculated the story in front of him. "Author this." Ray shouted and sent another piece of metal skittering into the parking lot. A third decoy. The hooded man fired again and cursed. The roof hatch slammed. Footfalls retreated toward the laundry wing. "He'll go for the paper," Ray said. Breath ragged. "He has to." "And we go for him," Ruiz said, already moving. "No," Ray said, grabbing his sleeve. "We go for proof. If we pull him, someone else steps in with another briefcase. But if we pull the ledger..." Ruiz stared at the growing smoke, and then at Leah's small fingers white-knuckling the car door. "We end the ritual?" He nodded, face hardening. "All right." They hit the laundry door low, wet cloth smoke clawing their throats. The flare had caught a mountain of lint. Flames lapped, but hadn't rooted. Ray dropped to hands and knees, scanning floor level. "Hatch," she coughed. Leah, who had followed stubborn as a moth chasing heat, darted left and thumped a palm on the warped board. "Here," she rasped, voice pin raw but sure. Ray jammed the screwdriver under the lip and levered. The hatch coughed, lifted. Below, the vault glowed with a smear of firelight. Shadows jostled Case' men hauling bins, cursing. There. Saving boxes, Ruiz said. Not people, boxes. That's the point, Ray said, throat blistering. He built a church. She slid down the ladder, no longer caring about caution. Heat rose like a beast's breath. One of the men swung his flashlight and froze at the sight of her, eyes bleaching wide. She slammed the screwdriver into the switch box on the wall, sparks spitting, and the space hiccuped with raw electricity. A strip light coughed to life. For one surgical second, she saw it all: the table of stamps, the ledger tower, the neat stacks of decades. Bad paper, Leah murmured behind her, unafraid now, the phrase an incantation. Ray grabbed the top ledger and hurled it into the flare's ember that had fallen through the hatch. The book hoomed, air catching dry pulp like tinder. A second ledger followed, and a third. The hooded man barreled toward her, and Ruiz met him mid-charge. A crash of shoulders and elbows, men swearing like animals. KS appeared in the hatch. Halo, face finally naked under the cap, not monstrous ordinary in a way that made Ray's skin crawl. He took in the burning books, the smoke ghosting around his archive, and the ledger of his calm blacked out. No, he said, small and honest. The word cost him something. He leapt the last rungs and landed hard, shoulder clipping Ray. She spun and they collided, grip on grip. He was stronger than his leanness implied. His hands were memorists, trained to hold. He drove her toward the table, reaching for a stamp as if even now he could mark her into place. Ray slammed his wrist to the wood. The stamp clattered. It went down in a knot of limbs and ash. If you burn the paper, he panted, eyes nearly wild, there's only noise. Then let there be noise, Ray growled and headbutted. Him. His teeth clicked. He reeled, then came back mean. They rolled in grit. A ledger thumped her shoulder, open to a page where her own name had been written and underlined. Collins, Ray, room 12. Checked out 2:06 a.m., he'd already written. Her final line. She laughed once, bitter and bright. Rewrite this, she said, and drove the screwdriver into the pipe feeding an overhead sprinkler. Water exploded, steam coughing the flames sideways. The ink bled instantly, names smearing into bruise blue. Ribbons. Kays made a sound like a father watching a favorite toy shatter. He lunged for the briefcase, always the briefcase, and Ray let him, because the documents inside hit the water and bloomed apart like dead jellyfish. He clawed at handfuls, fingers slipping. Above, officers shouted through the smoke, "Back up," finally crossing a threshold of doubt. Ruiz slammed the hooded man into the wall and zip-tied his wrists with a strip of laundry line and dragged him clear. "Move," he shouted. "This place is collapsing." Leah stood in the center of it, eyes reflecting fire and water, and whispered again, stronger, "Bad paper." Ray grabbed her and hauled her toward the ladder. Behind them, KS rose, tripping, his face a map that had lost its legend. "You think you've won," he said hoarsely, "but remembering is not justice. It's just pain." Ray looked back, voice wrecked. Pain is better than silence. They climbed. Smoke punched the Z. Hatch like a fist. The laundry room swam. Ruiz shouldered Leah's weight as Ray shoved the door open with her whole body. Night rushed them, huge and clean. They stumbled into it coughing, collapsing behind the sedan where cool air tasted like metal and miracle. Officers swarmed the lot now, sirens, commands, the red-blue throb of a world reasserting itself. Fire crawled the motel's mouth, then roared when a pocket of lint fed it joy. For a moment, Ray thought they'd lost Kays in the crush below that he'd vanish into the tunnels and reappear with another cap, another briefcase in another county. Then two deputies, half-dragged, half-carried a soaked, thrashing man into the lot and threw him against a hood. The cap fell off, his hair plastered thin to his skull. For a breath, he stared at Ray as if seeing himself in a mirror that refused. His shape. The calm returned to his face like an actor finding the mark. "Detective," he said mildly, voice threaded with smoke. "Congratulations. Now you have noise." Ray's chest ached. "Now I have a witness," she said, and turned. To Leah. The girl sat on the curb, blanket around her shoulders, eyes huge, breathing steady for the first time since Ray had seen her. Leah looked up and then down at her own hands as if checking they were still attached. "Am I a ledger?" she asked. Ray crouched. "No," she said. "You're a story. Yours." Leah's mouth trembled and then held. "I wrote under the floor because I thought the floor could keep secrets," she said. "But secrets just slept. You made them wake up." Ray swallowed the hot stone of tears. "You did," she said. "I only turned on the light." Behind them, the hill view. Lodge threw sparks like a carnival of ghosts. Roof timbers sagged. The sign that once blinked vacancy crackled and died. Ruiz sank beside Ray on the asphalt, his laugh as ragged as his cough. "You realize," he said, "there are 100 more ledgers in basements, storage units, glove boxes." "Maybe," Ray said, watching the flames find stars. "But we took the altar." In the wash of sirens and ash, she felt the tight rhythm of fear loosen half a notch. Not gone. It never went, but moved. Leah's fingers crept into hers with the cautious trust of someone who had touched too much fire and still reached. Somewhere, in the mess of radio chatter, a dispatcher said words that meant nothing and everything. "Scene secure." And Ray let them mean, for a minute, that the ritual had cracked. Kays turned his head and caught her eye again, and for that last long look, his flat voice fell away. All that remained was smallness, an ordinary man who had learned to bend paper until it made a cage and called it authorship. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She squeezed Leah's hand and breathed smoke and highway and night and thought. We unglued one story. Tomorrow we start another. The Hillview Lodge was nothing but a husk by morning, a blackened skeleton still smoldering where flames had eaten through its bones. Reporters swarmed the perimeter, cameras clicking like insects. Deputies kept them back, but the questions buzzed. Through anyway. How many victims? Was this linked to the other disappearances? Was the man in custody the mastermind? Ray didn't answer. She stood at the edge of the lot, with Leah wrapped in a government-issue blanket, watching the smoke coil upward, as if the motel were trying to whisper one last lie before collapsing into silence. Victor. Kays, the man in the cap, sat cuffed. In the back of a cruiser, his expression calm, almost satisfied. It unnerved Ray. Even after the ledgers burned, even after the receipts bled into ink smears, he didn't thrash or protest. He simply waited, as if this were another line in the narrative he had already written. Why does he look like he won? Ruiz muttered beside her, his voice hoarse from smoke. Ray didn't answer. She understood too well. A man who controlled stories for 30 years wouldn't panic just because someone tore a few chapters from the book. He'd believe there was always another copy hidden somewhere. At the hospital later, Leah was checked by doctors who spoke in hushed tones, marveling that she was alive after so long. She had scars, yes, malnutrition, trauma, faint lines of old restraints, but her heart still beat, her lungs still pulled air. When Ray stepped into the sterile room, Leah sat small on the bed, 4 in her arm, staring out the window at the Texas sun as though it were a stranger. Ray pulled a chair close. "How are you feeling?" Leah shrugged, eyes distant. He said, "If I ever left, the world wouldn't believe me. Paper would say I stayed." Ray leaned forward. Paper led. "You're here. Breathing. That's proof enough." Leah's lips pressed tight. After a long pause, she whispered, What if other girls are still under floors? The question lodged deep in Ray's chest. She had no answer, only the echo of tunnels beneath motels, the cabinets of ledgers, the briefcases full of receipts. The Hillview had been just one altar. How many others still stood, hidden under roadside dust? She squeezed Leah's hand gently. Then we'll find them. Back at the precinct, the interrogation began. KS sat across from Ray, wrists shackled, posture relaxed. The room smelled faintly of wet ash clinging to his clothes. She set a recorder on the table. State your name. He smiled faintly. You already know it. Say it, Ray pressed. His eyes glinted. Victor, that's enough. She leaned forward. Victor, we found the ledgers. We saw the names, the families. You can't erase that anymore. His expression didn't flicker. You burned paper, so you have ashes. Ashes don't testify. Her fists curled, but she kept her voice even. Leah survived. She will testify. A shadow of irritation passed across his face, the first crack she'd seen. She was supposed to be quiet. That was her role. Not anymore, Ray said. She's awake, and she remembers. Victor leaned back, chains clinking softly. You'll never find the rest. For every ledger you burn, there are 10 more. For every tunnel you crawl through, there are 100 miles of silence. Ray studied him carefully. He wasn't bluffing. Somewhere out there were other archives, other motels that had swallowed families whole. He hadn't been working alone. When the interrogation ended, Ruiz found her in the hallway, shoulders heavy. He's right, isn't he? He asked. There are more sites. Ray nodded slowly. But we've cut the head off. Without him, the system fractures. Ruiz didn't look convinced. Systems like that, they adapt. Someone else picks. Up the pen, Ray exhaled. Then we keep chasing, until the story runs out of authors. That night, Ray returned to her apartment for the first time in days. It felt foreign, as though she had been living somewhere else entirely. On her kitchen table sat the photographs the man in the cap had once delivered. The Halversons, the McCaffreys, her own image outside the motel. She stared at them long into the night, the faces blurring. All those families who hadn't been as lucky as Leah. All those names turned into ashes. She thought of Leah's question. What if other girls are still under floors? And the weight of it pressed like stone against her ribs. But for the first time in months, she also felt something different. Not just dread, not just rage, possibility. A girl once written into silence had spoken again. A ledger had been broken. And if one could break, so could others. Ray turned off the light and let the city hum outside her window. The war wasn't over. It might never be. But tonight, at least, a child had come home. The trial of Victor Case never truly felt like a trial. To Ray, it was more like theater bright lights, hushed audiences, lawyers reading from scripts, while the man in the cap sat there like an author, overseeing the stage play he had written decades earlier. The prosecution laid out the evidence. Leah's testimony, the receipts, the ledgers that hadn't burned, the photographs left like taunts. The defense countered with predictable arguments, fabricated evidence, unreliable witnesses, coerced. Memories, but what unsettled Ray most was Victor himself. He never flinched, never raised his voice. When Leah took the stand, trembling but steady, he didn't glare or threaten. He smiled faintly, as if proud of her performance in his ongoing story. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed. Headlines screamed about the receipt killer, though Ray hated the name. It reduced decades of pain to a headline that people could scroll past after breakfast. She wanted them to see the families, the children, the carved words on motel walls. We stayed here. We didn't leave. But the world liked villains more than victims. Cameras pointed at Victor. The flashes made him look untouchable, larger than life. Exactly what he wanted. One night after court adjourned, Ray sat in her apartment going over transcripts when her phone buzzed. An unknown number again. She braced herself. The message was short. He wasn't alone. Her skin prickled. She typed back quickly. "Who is this?" No reply. Just silence. She stared at the screen until her eyes blurred, then forwarded the number to Ruiz. His response was immediate. Already traced. Burner. Dead end. Ray leaned back in her chair, heart racing. She believed it. Victor had never acted alone. The network that maintained multiple motels, forged receipts, and silenced witnesses couldn't be the work of one man. No matter how meticulous. The next morning in court, an odd detail surfaced. One of the forensic accountants testified about the shell companies tied to the motels. He mentioned a signature that kept recurring on the contracts, not Victor's, but someone else's initials. J.H. Ray's pulse quickened. She scribbled the letters on her notepad, circling them again and again. J.H., a partner? A successor? She caught Victor watching her from across the courtroom. He winked, the faintest twitch of amusement, as if he knew exactly what she had. Just realized. That night she met Ruiz in a diner off the highway, a kind with buzzing neon and cracked vinyl booths. The coffee was bitter, but it kept her awake. She slid her notepad across the table. Hey, whoever that is, they're part of this. Ruiz nodded grimly. I've already started digging. Could be nothing. Could be everything. Ray lowered her voice. What if K's wanted us to find them? What if this is just the next act? Ruiz looked her dead in the eye. Then we finish it before the curtain closes. Meanwhile, Leah was placed under protective custody. She was fragile, but stronger each day. She had begun writing in a journal. Short sentences that broke Ray's heart. He told us not to breathe too loud. He counted the spoons. He made us sign papers even when we were children. Paper. Always paper. Receipts, ledgers, signatures. The network had built its power on ink and lies, and somehow, even now, it kept breathing. The verdict came after 3 weeks. Guilty on multiple counts of abduction, conspiracy, and fraud. Life without parole. Reporters cheered outside, families wept, and officials declared closure. But Ray knew better. The network wasn't dead. The initials J.H. haunted her. So did the text. He wasn't alone. 2 nights after the verdict, she returned home to find an envelope slid under her door. Inside was a single motel registration card. Date, March 2002. Location, a roadside inn outside Oklahoma City. Name scrawled across it, J. Halloway. Her blood ran cold. Halloway. The name had surfaced before in the old receipts. Another ghost. Another author. She sat heavily at her table, the card trembling in her hand. The trial was over, but the story wasn't. The motels weren't just Texas. They stretched farther, maybe across states, maybe across decades. Victor had been the face, but not the only hand on the pen. Somewhere out there, J.H. was still writing. And Ray knew one truth with perfect clarity. Her war with the motel's shadow was far from finished. The weeks after the trial felt strangely quiet, almost too quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The headlines faded, cameras moved on, and the world resumed its endless scroll of tragedies. But Ray knew silence was never safety. Silence was the sound the motel had always thrived in. Leah remained in protective care, slowly rebuilding her sense of self. Some days she spoke in fragments. Some days she refused to speak at all. But every now and then, she would look Ray in the eye and whisper a word that froze her blood. Others. It was always that word. Not just her, Not just the Halversons or the McCaffreys. Others. Families swallowed whole by a network Ray still couldn't fully map. One evening, Ray returned to her apartment to find another envelope waiting on the floor. This one wasn't. Blank. In red ink across the front was a single phrase. Stories don't end. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a photograph, black and white, grainy like the others. It showed a different motel, not the Red Oak, not the Hillview. The sign was barely legible, letters missing, but the year scrawled at the bottom corner said 2004. In front of the building stood a family of 5, smiling at the camera, unaware. Ray flipped it over. On the back, in the same red ink, was written, "Do you want to find them too?" She called Ruiz immediately. Within an hour, they sat in his office. The photograph spread across the desk under harsh fluorescent light. Ruiz rubbed his temples. "We can't chase shadows forever. You saw what the trial did. It nearly broke you." Ray shook her head. "It's not over. Kay's was just one face of this. Whoever JH is, they're still out there, still running motels, still feeding this machine." Ruiz sighed, but he didn't argue. He leaned forward, voice low. "Then we need to do it off the books. No more press, no more headlines. We go quiet. That's the only way to stay alive." The following days blurred into long drives and late nights. They traced records, cross-checked ledgers, and pulled property deeds from dusty archives. The initials JH kept surfacing like stains on paper that refused to fade. One motel in Oklahoma, another in Louisiana. Receipts forged, families erased. Each breadcrumb felt like bait, but Ray couldn't stop. The network was still active, still breathing, and if she didn't follow, more people would vanish. Late one night, she found herself parked outside the motel from the photograph. The sign hung crooked, half its bulbs burned out. The lot was empty except for 2 rusting cars. She sat with her headlights off, gripping the wheel, heart thundering. Every instinct screamed to drive away, to let it end. But she thought of Leah's. Note scratched into plaster, of the Halverson's empty SUV, of the countless names blurred into receipts. She stepped out into the dark. The air smelled of mildew and dust, the scent of every motel that had devoured families before. A light flickered in the office window. Inside, she saw movement. A man at the counter, head bowed, signing something. The hair on her neck bristled. She crept closer, peering through the glass. On the desk lay a stack of receipts, fresh ink glistening. The man lifted his head just slightly. A cap shadowed his face. Not Victor, someone younger, someone continuing. The script, Ray froze. He turned suddenly, as if sensing her, and their eyes met through the glass. His lips curved into the faintest smile, chillingly familiar. He held up a single slip of paper to the window. She couldn't see the writing, but she didn't need to. It was for her. Another receipt. Another invitation. She staggered back, breath caught in her throat, then turned and hurried to her car. Tires screeched against gravel as she pulled onto the highway, headlights carving through the dark. Her phone buzzed on the seat beside her. A text lit the screen. "Welcome to the next chapter." Ray's grip tightened on the wheel. She realized then what Victor had meant in his final words. Paper was forever, and the story, the network of motels, the forged receipts, the families erased, wasn't over. It never had been. She wasn't chasing an ending. She was stepping into a story that had been writing itself for decades, one that wasn't finished and maybe never would be. As dawn broke, Ray whispered to herself, steady but fierce, "Then I'll be the one to write the last page."